Hey everyone, George here and welcome back to the channel. So our friends at Oase have sent me a mini external canister filter that I think that you're really going to get excited about here. Now, the product that I'm talking about here is the Oase FiltoSmart 60, which is a filtration system that is really designed around nano tank systems. But I'm going to be using it for something slightly different than that, and we're going to get to an unboxing here in just a second, but I want to talk about a couple of things about this before we do the unboxing. Now, as I said, this is an external canister which can be used to about 16 gallons, no more than that, and it runs about 80 gallons per hour through there. That's about 300 liters. And I would not use this all the way up to 16 gallons. I would be looking at probably using this maximum up to about 10 gallons. And we're going to talk about why that I recommend that, and we're going to talk about how quiet and efficient this system is and see if it really holds true to that. And we're going to get to that in just a few minutes. So hang in there with me and we'll be right back. Even though Seachem and Aquavitro are not an official sponsor of this channel, I do hope that you'll go out and try some of their amazing products today. They're some of the best on the market. Now let's get to our video. So, in the interest of saving some time, I went ahead and I took and unboxed this. Now, I know that there's this ritual that a lot of videos do where they do the unboxing in front of you and act surprised like they, don't know what's in this box. Well, I didn't want to do that because I don't want to waste your time or mine. I really basically took the parts out of here and became familiar with them and just sort of laid them out here. And we're going to go through this because I've been reading a little bit on this, and I want to make sure that I'm giving you a good analogy of how this mini canister filter works by Oase. And again, this is the FiltoSmart 60 by Oase, which is an external mini filter canister, which you don't see those too often. I do have one over against those two tanks over there. It's a really off-brand that I did a review on some months back, but Oase is a product that I've always liked. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about what I came up with here. Now, surprisingly, when I opened the box here and I removed the top off this, I found there is a sponge in the one side here, which is good because that's sponge filtration, I think, is some of the best filtration out there these days. And this can be a 2 or 3 part system based on what I'm reading in the instruction manual. Now, 2 bags of these ceramics came with this. It does suggest that there is a carbon supplement that you can put in here. In other words, they send you 2 bags of the ceramic, which you can see down in here are these ceramic rings, but they also say that you can just put 1 bag of the ceramics in here and then put a carbon or charcoal packet on the top of this. You always want the charcoal to go on top and the ceramics to be on the bottom. And again, so they give you an option of going from a 2 phase system to a 3 phase system, which I will probably do that. I will probably leave the 2 in here and put a small pack up in this area here, because if you look at the top of this, there really isn't anything preventing you from doing that. So basically what I'm going to do is probably find something or make something of my own that has some charcoal components to it and put it in this side over here. Now, let's get to the system itself here. As I said, this basically, they talk about on the box here, they talk about how the max on this is 16 gallons or 60 liters. I really don't recommend doing that unless you are really confident in the filtration of this thing. I would suggest that you probably use this no more than a 10-gallon tank, and not really try to push the system that hard, because I think if you can get maximum filtration out of that, 10 gallons is probably your best bet. Now, what they're offering here is a maximum of 80 gallons per hour or 300 liters for our European friends, and that's pretty good. Now, if you're using this for a standalone system, in other words, you're using it by itself with like a 10-gallon tank or whatever, that's what I would recommend to you, is no more than 10 gallons and get the maximum you can out of this. Now, I'm going to be using this for something slightly different, so my needs are a little bit different. I'm going to be using this for supplemental filtration on a 20-gallon system to reduce organics, ammonia, nitrites, nitrates, etc. So let's get back to the unit itself here and start figuring out how this goes together. Now, as I said, you have your sponge filtration on the one side here, and you have your ceramics over here. And as I said, again, I'm just going to repeat it really quickly, that I am going to add a carbon filtration component to this, which is going to suit my needs better. That may be something you don't need. I think if you add that component to it, you're going to get a lot more out of this system. Like I said, it's designed that way. If you look at the instructions in here, they do show a component of this as being right here, a bag of charcoal or carbon that can be used, and this of course is your ceramics down here. So again, if that's something that you want to do, it's not hard to do that. You just add it, but make sure again that you do have the ceramics at the very bottom of this. So let's get to putting this thing together. So my understanding is basically that this is going to be your external pull on this thing. So this is going to be pulling out of the system on this side over here. So this is your out. And of course they do have the little rigid tube on here to make sure that you're not pulling stuff through the motor up in here that's going to damage it. And basically all you're going to be doing is putting this on the top here and sliding this on here. Now you want to make sure when you're doing this that you have a good seal, because it can be rather hard to make sure that this thing is seated correctly, but if you don't, you could end up with this thing leaking, and we don't want that, obviously. So the best thing to do is to take and look at the ring all the way around on this and rotate it all the way around, and as you can see, it has a lock on both sides, on this side as well as this side. Look at your ring, look at everything, and make sure that this is sealed properly, and it appears that it is. So you just basically want to go around and make sure that this thing is really, put together really well. And at this point here, what we're going to do is just lock it. So we're locked on this side, and now we're going to lock this side over here, and it should lock smoothly. If it's not locking smoothly, I recommend that you go back and check that seal and make sure that the top is on here correctly. Now, before you use this system, you're going to fill this with water. Do not start this up and not have water in it, because you're likely to burn this system out. We don't want to do that. We want to have water filled up. There's a little line in here that gives you an indication as to where the water is. This thing is locked at this point, and it's pushed down, really sealed really well, so you should not have any leaks at all. And make sure that you get that water in there. I would use either some distilled water or some treated water that you already have on hand. Now, This on the top goes in here like this. It just sets down in here after you've put your water in, and you're just going to turn this basically to lock it into place. That makes sure that no water is going to come out of this area at all. But this gives you an opportunity to check this system and prime it, because that's basically what you're going to have to do. Some of these you have to use a pump to prime them and so forth. On this one you don't have to do this. Again, this is a small system. It's not very real sophisticated. However, it is built really, really well. I can tell just by playing around with it that it is. So again, we're going to put that in there and we're going to lock that into place. Now, these are your little screw-on things that are going to hold your hose on. We're going to put that on both sides here, and we're going to spin them down until we get them into place. And again, the system is locked. You want to make sure of that. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our hose. Now, hose can be very, very rigid when you get it. So what I would recommend to someone who is putting this system together is to heat up some water and to stick this hose in there, the two pieces of hose, and make sure that they're really soft and pliable, and get them bent to the shape that you want. We're not going to do that right now for the sake of time, but that's something as a tip that I would recommend to you, is setting this in some really hot water or warm water to get this a little bit more flexible and not so rigid, and put that tubing on after you've done that. So that's going to make it easier to get these on these little nipples here, and also onto these little bars that come with it as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and put these on here. It actually went on pretty easily. So you're going to spin this little screw up on here, and it's not really a nut, but you don't want to over tighten these either, because it's really not necessary. Once you feel resistance on this, that's pretty much all you need to do. You don't need to push on it any harder than that. And we're going to do the same thing on the opposite side here. I want to make sure that I've got this correct. So we're going to do that on this side here. Again, that went on really easy. And then we're just going to spin this thing up on here until, like I said, it just meets a little bit of resistance. And once it does that, you don't want to over tighten. You just want to leave it at about where it is right there. Now, the two different tubes that we have here are basically tubes that can be adjusted. This one that goes on the bottom here, if this is too long for the inside of your tank, which it could be, then you are able to cut these things. Now, I don't recommend cutting them with something that is going to this is pretty hard plastic, so you want to use something that is like a hacksaw or something like that, or for a minimum I would use probably a serrated knife of some kind to cut this to the size that you want it to be. Now, my tanks are quite tall. What I'm going to be using this for is a 20-gallon water box cube, and the back chamber in which I'm going to be putting this in, as I said, I'm going to be using this for supplemental filtration and not for a full system filter. Again, you can cut this to different sizes. If you have a tank that is not near as tall, you want to look at that. You want to take your measurements based on this resting just slightly above your glass. You don't want this touching the glass, because there is no rubber on this for it to not vibrate. So you want to have this just above, and then of course these are going to allow you to have your hose. Actually, it would sit like this. So you're going to have it coming up through here. The water is going to be sucking through here, and you're going to have this little filter type situation on the bottom. You can put it however it's best for you and your system, but basically all this is the same thing as the tube that was in here. It just prevents large chunks of anything getting up into the system and being pushed back out through into your chamber there. So once you've got this the height that you want it, all you have to do at that point is suction cup this against the walls of your tank, or in my case here, to the chamber in the back of the aquarium. We're going to get to that shortly here when I actually put this into a tank in the next segment, and you'll see exactly what I mean about that. So now we've got this one put together here. I've got this at the length that I want it. And then we're going to take the second one, which is this side over here. And this has a little cap on the bottom, as you can see. And this has holes all along the edge here. And basically it's going to go in your tank like this. The hose is going to come up through here. And at this point here, you're going to have the water spraying out of these small little holes that are all along here. Again, if you need to adjust this for any reason, all you need to do is cut this, but you got to do a good job of it, because this little stopper here at the bottom, this little cap, is going to not fit correctly if you pinch this in any way or warp it or disfigure it in any way. It's not going to fit on there correctly, and that's going to be a problem. So make sure if you do have to cut this side over here that you're careful to do that, and make sure that it is not you know, like I said, messed up in any way, and that the cap fits on there really well. So now what we're going to do basically is we're going to take the hoses and put them on here. Now what we have here is the same thing that we did over here. We have these little nuts here that are going to go into this. It can be a little bit hard to get those on there. Once they're on there, you're going to take and just turn this until you start to feel some resistance. Once you've done that, you really are sealed really well. And we're just going to lean that up against there, and we're going to do the same thing with the other side here. And we're going to take a look at how that's going to sit in the tank. And again, if you are having problems with this, make sure that you soften the tube up so that it's flexible, and you may actually have to cut this tube. Now basically what I did is just cut the tube in half, and you may need to actually cut it a little bit shorter for it to sit in here correctly. So again, we're going to do the same thing on this side here. We're going to have this go down in here, and then we're going to screw it down on here just until we meet some resistance. Once we've done that and it's tight, and we don't want to over tighten this. That's basically what we don't want to do, is get a situation where we're over tightening this, because they tend to leak if you do that. Once you feel that resistance on either one of these, or on these over here where they go into the canister, then you really have pretty much put these together in a way that they're not going to leak. So you got to be really careful about that. So we're going to find out how well this system works. I'm really excited to put this into an aquarium. Like I said, I'm going to use this on a water box, 20 gallon, and I'm using this for supplemental filtering only. So none of this stuff is going to be seen in my tank. This is basically going to go in the back chamber of the tank, and it's going to pull water in, push water back out, and do that extra filtration before it ever even gets to my main pump. Now the reason for that is because I like crystal clear water. If you look at all of my tanks back here, they're absolutely crystal clear. Now, what we're going to do in the next segment is we're going to attach this to a tank here, probably not the one that I'm actually going to use it on, but one that I have in the gallery here. that's easy to look at. And when we come back, we're going to be doing that. So hang in there with me, and I will be right back, and we will see how this works as far as getting this set up in a tank. Anyways, hang in there with me. Be right back. So hey everybody, welcome back. And so I have pretty much hooked this thing up, and I'm going to kind of go through it because there's some problems with these hoses because they're not cut to the exact shape. And as I said, if you want these hoses to be flexible, you really need to put them in some hot water, some warm water, and let them sit for a little while so that they can get really flexible. And also the other problem that we have is we're not using the tank that this is going on because it's going to be a little bit more difficult to set that up. And I wanted you to see basically how this goes without having to show you on the actual tank, because the tanks are identical. The only thing that's going to be different is where this is going to be placed, and that will be in a little pocket against the wall, and these tubes will sit in there. And really that's the only difference that we're talking about here. So this is not something that is misleading in any way. This is exactly how it's going to be set up in the other tank. But I want to talk to you about a couple of things. Now, this is your intake and your outtake, both in the same chamber right here, and this is the same chamber that the pump is in. Now, the reason why you cannot do that in a different chamber is because you have some ceramic down in here, you have some charcoal down in here, and you also have some sponges down in the center part of this tank right over in here. And the only way that you would be able to do that is to cut a hole in that sponge. You don't need to do that. As I said, in the tank that's over here, I already have one of these. It's not the same model, obviously, but it is similar to it, and it's running in there. So these hoses obviously are going to have to be played around with a little bit so that we have that flexibility and the ability to get them into the chamber there without this real rigid feeling here. And they're too long. We're going to have to cut these a little bit shorter because this thing is going to tuck right up against the glass on the side where you don't see, and it's going to sit there. In order for it to do that, as you can see, it would just be falling over. You've got to have these tubes shorter so that they're not pushing on it like that. See, as the further away you get and the tube is more correct in size, the more it just stands up on here the way it's supposed to. Now, once you've done that, it is so important that you understand, just like any of these canister filters, that you take the fill cap off on here, and it has an open and close, and you take some either distilled water or water that has been treated already and put it down in here, and that's all you really have to do. At that point, you're just replacing the cap, and you're going to go ahead and plug your system in. Now, as in anything that you're plugging into the wall that has water on it, try to create a loop on the cord so that you don't have a situation where you're making your GFI blow or whatever in case water ever does drip down in there. You don't want a situation where you don't have that loop on there and then water gets up into your outlet. So that's something that I would just tell you to make sure that you do before you go any further with the plugging in. I would just make sure that that loop is in there just as a safety precaution. That's not something that I do all the time, but whenever I have a canister tank like this where you have water that is sitting in a small area like this and it leaks for some reason, you want to make sure that you do have that loop in there. So now we have our intake, our outtake on here, and everything's in place. This will be exactly how it'll be set up on the other tank. We're going to shorten these tubes up on the other tank, of course, because we don't need this much tube. This is way too much, and it's very rigid, like I said. So we will put that in some warm water and get it to soften up a little bit and to make sure that it is pliable. So When we come back, we're going to talk about this whole thing after I've run it for about 48 hours, and then we'll talk about what I think of this little guy, and we'll give it a rating and see if it's something I think that would be good for you guys as a supplemental filter or as a filter for a nano tank. If you've got something that's around 10 gallons or less, and you're able to use something like this, I really recommend it, because the more filtration, as I always say, the more filtration you have, the better your tank is going to be as far as how clean it is, and also keeping algae away and those sort of things. The less organics you have in there, the more plants that you have in there, the less opportunities you're going to have for algae to compete and grow in the tank. So anyways, when we come back, we are going to summarize this whole thing. Stick with me and we'll be back in just a minute here. So after running this filter for about 48 hours now, I really have to tell you, it's an excellent system. I got all the little kinks worked out with the hoses and that sort of thing. You really do need to take those hoses and put them in some hot water and let them sit for a little while so that you can get those to the right shape. Also, I needed to cut them a little bit shorter. As I said, that was just a demonstration over there that I did a few days ago, and it was really not the tank that it was meant to be on. So having made all those changes and adjustments and whatever, I'm really happy with this system. It's you know, it's very compact. I have several of these. I actually bought 3 of them, and it is a really compact system that I really think that if you were to use this for a nano tank, you know, I wouldn't use it for anything more than 10 gallons. It says 16 gallons on the box here, but the bottom line is that I would not use this on anything more than about 10 gallons, because I don't like taxing the system to the point where you're right to the limit on it. 10 gallons or under, I think this is a great little external canister filter for just about anybody that has a nano tank, or as I said, if you're going to use it like I am and use it as a supplementary filtration system, it is excellent. So, you know, if I wanted to score this thing, you know, 1 to 10 here, I would give this a solid 8. The only thing that I do not like about it, and it's just a weird little thing, is it did not come with a charcoal, 3rd stage charcoal. They sent actually 2 ceramic packets rather than a charcoal or carbon packet that was supposed to come with it. Now, that's what it says in the instructions. So, you know, if you get one of these things and that happens to you, then either the instructions are wrong or whatever. But I was able to go out and buy a small supplemental packet and put it in here, and it really works good. So I'm really happy with the whole thing. Now, again, as I always tell people, read the instructions in this thing and make sure that you are setting it up correctly. It's really easy to make mistakes on these things, and you know, this is not real sophisticated stuff, obviously, but if you read the instructions, you're always going to be ahead of the game on it, and it's going to be a better thing for you, because you're just not going to have a situation where you make a mistake. So anyways, bottom line is, thank you so much for joining me, and please leave your comments down below. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe. The subscriptions are going up on this channel, and I really do appreciate it. Also, look for that bell up at the top there and hit it, because that gives you an idea of when we have some new content coming out. Lots of fun stuff coming up here, and I don't want you to miss that. So, you know, like I said, hit the bell up there as a reminder that new content is available. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for sitting in with me on this rather long video about a really kind of cool little compact nano size canister, external canister filter that I really am happy with. So anyways, thank you so much for joining me. We will see you on the next one. Until then, we're out of here.